Every now and then a game comes along that is so great you almost have to consider it a gem. To be forthright from the start, there is very little I can complain or say negatively about this game. It's nearly perfect, and this review is going to be somewhat heaping praise on something that has already been praised by everybody else. Thankfully, I already know from reading many other reviews that there are a few things that I want to point out that very few, or perhaps even no one else, has bothered to mention. That doesn't mean I won't be repeating some of the same things that others have said already, because in the off chance that you only want to watch or read one review before making a purchase, and that review happens to be mine, I should include all that I can. I am going to go to efforts to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible, because my playthrough obviously is not. The vids showing in the background will be without cutscenes, so as to not give anything away. The story and the world. What Naughty Dog did right with this game is understand the concept that a simple story told well is often better than a complex one. While complexity can be wonderful, it doesn't always do justice when a tale requires a beginning and an end. Just think Avatar. The Last of Us is not nearly as simple as that movie, as it is written oh so much better. The world is laid out in pieces that are just enough for us to understand. However, it's not the character's place, or the player's, to grasp all of the world. The story of The Last of Us is via the perspective of the characters involved. The larger picture of what is going on in the world and how it has changed is only revealed through their experiences and their interest in what exists. Their ideas and goals are the only that are relevant, as the scope of a handful of people cannot be larger than such, and they are never acting as global heroes. The world of The Last of Us is a much larger place than we will ever know, and that is an excellent thing. This setting is a post-apocalyptic mayhem which meets somewhere between The Walking Dead and Half-Life. Truly, except for the fact that there are no slow-moving zombies, this is precisely what a Walking Dead game should be. As far as zombie games are concerned, there is no need to play any other ever again. Unless something comes out in the future that is even better, of course. The world is decrepit, broken apart, with humanity so fragmented that they are not even sure other humans should be trusted. With credit to the art designers, to summarize a bunch of jobs in one stroke, it's an entirely believable world. From the cracks in the walls that have aged without care, to the scattered debris left behind by those who found nothing to scavenge, it's all perfect. Included with this are the few settlements that exist, which, while in better shape than their neighboring, nearly forgotten modern ruins, still resemble nothing more than depressing, fading hopes. What stacks onto all of this is the interesting new element that Naughty Dog remembered to add in, that of nature itself. Trees, leaves, vines, and water have not only broken through and overgrown many man-made structures, but have thrived to be more than 20 years' growth should allow for. The acting and the graphics. What shines in unison with the art and story is the acting. I have to give incredible props to every single voice actor who participated in this game. There wasn't a single moment in which I did not believe the characters. That is to say, not a single moment which they did not seem real. The two main characters in particular, while obviously cast with their dominant roles in mind, do an incredible job of convincing the player that you are in their world. The tiniest inflections and emotions are evident when they are supposed to be. It doesn't hurt that the graphics of this game are such a powerhouse that the character animations are detailed and human-like enough that no words could be said, and I would still know every thought that was occurring in a conversation. Seriously, these characters are so close to looking like actual people that I wonder if in the next generation of games, companies like Naughty Dog will fool players into believing that live-action cutscenes are included, when they're not. The mixture of those two elements, the graphics and the voice acting, had me wanting to give Joel a slap on the shoulder now and then with encouragement, while hugging it out with Ellie to tell her it was going to be alright. They felt as if real people, and I have never been so closely connected to a game's characters as I have been in The Last of Us. The only real complaint I have is with a character named Tess, but not with the voice actress by any means. Perhaps it is just my perception, but her head seemed just a centimeter or two small. It didn't quite look right on her body when looking at her from the front and with her whole body in frame. It's also a matter of the little details as far as the graphics are concerned. If you are crouching behind an object and Ellie is in front of you, an issue doesn't arise with her being forced backward or you forward, or vice versa. Nor is there usually a weird graphical fluke in which they are the same person for a moment. Joel, being larger than Ellie, will crouch right beside her, his arm behind her head, taking a believable and correct stance to remain hidden together. There's also little things like how Joel will glide his hand along an object as he passes it, or maneuvers up and down stairs with step-by-step precision. The immersion is constant and damn near perfect. That is to say, with one glaring, but entirely acceptable, exception. Your companions are not to be detected by the enemies, or even be noticed during the fights, aside from an obvious few heavily scripted moments. They can even bump into an enemy's knees as they sneak about, and nothing will come of it. This is true even on the Survivor difficulty, and while this does injure the immersion a little, I have to defend that it is the best choice. A game like this in which your companions could be seen would mean they would constantly be so. It would be unbearably frustrating to have them ruin the stealth over and over again. Perhaps this means that there is something to be said about finding a fix for future games to improve the relationship between having companions and stealth combat, but I certainly can't think of a way to amend. Therefore, the only option would be to have them wait in the background, away from the actual event. That, however, is not The Last of Us. I prefer having the allies nearby at all times, as a part of Joel's existence, and therefore agree with the choice Naughty Dog has made, in having his companions unable to be detected. The lighting and the shadows. The darkness is done especially well, in that I was able to see almost the entire time even without using my flashlight. Sometimes it felt as if I might be missing something by keeping it off, but I never felt that it was required to turn it on. That is, with little exception. There were a few portions of the game in which a flashlight was absolutely required, because your sight was so densely hindered. However, for one of these sections I still didn't turn on my flashlight, and I made it through. I loved this, because in that situation I would not have wanted to turn on my light and draw attention to my position. Even if I had to go slower and risk becoming disoriented, it was a welcome alternative to drawing attention. I was glad that I could make that choice. It's also worth mentioning that the flashlight is so gently woven in that it does not drain a resource. It's simple a matter of clicking it on and off, and your character doesn't even bother to reach up to make the adjustment. It would have been simple enough to show Joel swish his hand toward his chest, even with the weapon equipped, but Naughty Dog decided not to bother. You think this would ruin the immersion, but it does not at all. I was glad that such a minor importance was left easy to manipulate. At times you do have to shake the controller as if shaking a real flashlight, because it is experiencing a slight short, but it's quick and seamless. To top off the contrast between the well-lit areas and the darkness are the excellent shadows. The majority of objects and people in the game create realistic, real-time shadows that fully react to the flashlight and other light sources. I really could go on and on about the lighting and shadows, but let's just say that they are the best I've seen to date. Crafting and upgrading. In most games with crafting involved, I often become annoyed and overburdened by the task. To compare another zombie game, there's Dead Rising. It was frustratingly annoying to craft in that game, and to this day I am still unclear as to what parts made what and how long they would last. That had in part to do with the game's pacing, but so does why it works so well in The Last of Us. The parts and outcomes are simple, and yet every single one is necessary and worth using at different times. Not just different times, but different occasions per each encounter and individual player. Collecting the components was a breeze because they were scattered about in the world, simple enough for anyone to find, and useful enough to flesh out the game. Not just simply found, but organically, lying in the world as if part of the setting. The other terrific decision, despite that you had to collect specific components for your secondary tools, those being your health packs and shivs for example, was that to upgrade your primary tools, your weapons, you collected scrap bolts and bits of metal. I hate it in a game when I need to collect a specific piece for my weapon in order to upgrade it, and if I happen to skip over that piece, my progress on improving that weapon is screwed. The Last of Us instead has a system in which a general crafting currency is spent on whatever weapon the player wants. It's up to them to make the choice of how they want to improve their character's arsenal. All of this crafting is done in real time, which is usually not a problem unless you are in combat, and that is supposed to be the point. Then there are also upgrades to Joel himself, some of which are slightly silly. They exist simply to help round out the feeling of being upgraded, and I suppose because they wanted more choices to exist for a complete-looking upgrade menu. Music and sound. Quickly, I want to mention both the sound and the music. The sounds help the world feel alive, from the creaks of the floorboards to the chirps of the enemies. It's truly as if you can hear what Joel is hearing and learn to react in the way he should. This is the time in which I need to bring up the listen mode. I've seen a lot of hatred for this mode on forums and how people are insisting on never using it. That's the first bonus right there, that it's not something that has to be used. If simply never hitting the button isn't enough for you, it can be turned off entirely in the options. It should also be noted that in the game's hardest difficulty, Survivor, you cannot use listen mode at all. I have played through the Survivor difficulty and will report that the game is just as great without the ability. It requires a lot more death, a lot more trial and error, but it works. That is why the listen mode is a worthwhile mechanic, however, because it gives the player a chance to survive that they normally would not have. The realistic version of The Last of Us story would have Joel dead the first time he is forced to fight. Listen mode gives us an acceptable method for him to stay alive, and makes the immersion into the game just a little more believable, as far as Joel's surviving is concerned. There's not much to say about the music, except that it is integrated extremely well. While the music itself is well composed, it's often not center stage. It operates in the background, adding emotion or suspense when required. When allowed to roam freely, it does so, and always finds a way to assist whatever is happening in the game. As far as the combat is concerned, I do have to admit that sometimes it could be frustrating, especially in the later sections of the game, when I'm sure it was supposed to become more difficult. I would often be surprised at how poorly I could handle even one assailant. While the majority of the time the deaths of the enemies were within reason, one shot here, 2 or 3 shots there, every now and then I was startled by the living power of some of the mobs. I can recall one exchange in particular in which I scored 4 headshots on a human target. He was wearing a helmet and the first only knocked off the helmet, which was fair, but I thought for sure he was done after the second round. He sprung back up when I attempted to move on, so I shot him down again, only to find that he was still not finished, and all 4 of these shots were headshots. These moments were few and far between, thankfully, because there's nothing I hate more than a realistic game, in this regard, with enemies that can suffer an inane amount of damage. I don't want to give a completely negative impression of the combat, because it functions extremely well. The aiming in this game is definitely one of the best that I have experienced, and is far better than the Uncharted titles. Then there's the stealth. It works great, it's easy to maneuver around in silence, and taking enemies out in this fashion is a blast. I won't give any spoiler, but in the later half of the game we are treated to a stealth kill showcase, or at least it was from my experience, and it helped me love the game even more. I do have to say that at the same time as I praise it, I found some stealth kill opportunities to be robbed from me. I should have been able to initiate the grab effect, which leads to killing, but instead the enemies surprisingly saw me, as if they had heard me hitting the button. I even had one occasion in which I was mashing the grab button behind an enemy and nothing was happening. The function was broken momentarily, and it took me bumping the guy, him technically being alert, for me to initiate the grab. That is another bonus, however, that an enemy can still be grabbed within the first moments of becoming alert. They spot you, begin to take action, and can be grapple-killed. The weapon durability, I definitely need to bring it up. Outside of firearms, any weapon Joel happens to pick up will break within a few swings, and is then discarded or replaced if a replacement is within reach. I have seen this trend in several other games, and 2 specific zombie games come to mind, Dead Rising and Dead Island. It bothers me to no end that these weapons are always falling apart. Now, if I pick up a piece of splintering wood, it might only last for 1 kill, but a machete? That's an actual forged weapon, used for cutting through hundreds or thousands of people and jungle foliage in real life. I understand that it is part of the gameplay in all cases, and that if you had an everlasting weapon, it will strip away some of the difficulty, but I hope that one day there is a way around this hiccup in a zombie game. That said, I found myself ceasing to be bothered by this endurance dilemma in The Last of Us. You are always aware of it because you always need to be strategizing and looking for another weapon, but there are enough in the world that you don't often go without. Or more importantly, feel as if you can't go on without a weapon. The game is designed better than that. While the durability of these weapons was still lame, it didn't matter because the game continued to press you forward and didn't let you bother to worry about the former lost weapon. There are only two more things I wish to discuss in this review, and one of them I have to be careful with as to not give spoilers, so I will keep it short. The game's cutscenes are remarkable, and the opening scene is easily the best I have experienced, with the only possible rival being the original BioShock. The other is the game's glorious autosave and checkpoint feature, and I do not use glorious lightly. Despite how glaringly difficult The Last of Us can be, it never feels unfair at all, with minor exception. The game's autosave kicks in almost constantly, so that between every group of enemies you are safe. When you die, you will find yourself back only a few minutes at most, but never further than right before the latest enemy group. There was even one occasion in which I snuck by a whole group of enemies and then died at the very last, who was standing in front of my exit. The game loaded me right before this last enemy as if rewarding me for my previous successful sneak. And when you do have to get loading to the latest checkpoint, it happens within a few seconds. I never even had time to give up because I would die, wait a beat, and then be playing once again. As far as I can tell, this is achieved because you do have to wait through a lofty loading screen at the start of each play session, when you load your game initially, but it is absolutely worth it. It was the best decision to have the game function this way because they expect you to die, but didn't want it to have to become frustrating. All extremely challenging games should take notice of this for the future. It's worth mentioning that I did come across a few glitches, one that was nearly game-breaking. Graphical stuff now and then, including a fraction of missing information at the very beginning in terms of the story. I watched the prologue online and saw that I had glitched past an important timeline moment. One glitch even forced me to restart the game and system several times in an attempt to fix. I eventually read that some people uninstalled the release day patch to assist with a different error, and so I tried that and found success. I also happened to have a bad disk, one that would not allow me to finish the game. This is unfair to blame on The Last of Us, or even Naughty Dog, because these things happen. However, it is the first bad disk I have ever purchased even after all these years, so I can't help but include this information. All in all, if there is anything needed to be said in summary of this title, it is that it is an absolute must-play. No, playing it is not enough. This game deserves to be bought more than any other. We are near the end of this generation of games now, so I suppose this is fitting, but The Last of Us really feels like the pinnacle of what was to be achieved since November 2006, when the PlayStation 3 was released. It's a very hard choice for me, but if someone told me that a gun had been put to their head, and they had been forced to select one game from this generation as the best, I would not fault them for choosing The Last of Us.